Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, Pwn Phone, and Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com. Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns in application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm here with our very special guest. Ping Look is here with us. Ping, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And now, Ping, I'm told you are overseeing the development and implementation of the Optiv Internal Security Awareness and Education Program. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And I also sit on the External Security Communications and Awareness team, which is the external security awareness offering that we have at Optiv.
And your background lends itself to that, as when we first met, you were doing work for Black Hat for the trainings, correct?
That's correct. I was the event director at Black Hat, and I oversaw the selection and management of the training trainers and the programs that we had there, as well as all the speakers for the briefings.
And that was not stressful at all, managing
No, because they were all great like you.
Yeah, right.
They're all super responsive, on time, delivered what they promised. I never had any angry or upset delegates at the conference ever.
Oh, well, hopefully your new job is not as stressful as your previous one. So what kind of things do you do with internal security awareness in education? What does internal mean? Does that mean Optiv's customers?
No, it actually means for our the Optiv Corporate Security Program.
Okay.
So if we have security bulletins that need to be pushed out, expeditious, like there's a phishing attack that is continuing on, or if we need to make sure that everyone's updating their mobile devices or making sure that they're logging on to VPN to get all the updates pushed because it's a critical update. I send out those bulletins. I make sure that everyone's participating in we have an e-learning for our annual refresher course, as well as new employees for their onboarding. And I also act as the liaison between many very different business units to make sure that their needs are being met in terms of what they feel needs to be pushed to their particular business units for security awareness. So, for finance, they have different needs than, say, the C-suite, than, say, people and benefits, which is our HR team. The security consultants have completely different concerns than, say, the admins in sales support. So work between a lot of the different business units. But a lot of my work is basically, it boils down to program management, but a lot of communications and just working through the corporate ropes.
Yeah. So how do you motivate folks that aren't a security consultant, as the example you gave, they're in finance? How do you motivate them to be excited about applying patches and not clicking on phishing attacks and stuff?
Well, I don't tend to use the big stick, and I tend to use a lot of I explain a lot, right? I don't ever say, look, hurry up, update your phone. I tell them, look, you need to update your phone because X, Y, and Z has happened, and we need to get ahead of the problem. So please be a responsible corporate citizen. And when you ask people to invest and actually participate versus being like, we are commanding that you X, Y, Z complete this action, it usually works a lot better. I have a lot of one-on-one conversations. Mm-hmm. I follow up a lot with the managers to make sure that, any of their direct reports. And so when you follow up with managers, then you're asking them to actually be responsible as well. And it just trickles all the way down. And I think the program at Optiv is very, very successful. It's received mostly positively. There are some negatives, of course, always. But we get very good participation in the program. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the interesting kind of case studies that I looked at recently were it was a company that made a Chrome plugin, and the developers were the victims of a targeted phishing attack. And the attack came in and basically kind of put them in a tizzy because they were like, your plugin's going to be pulled from the Chrome store if you don't go click this link and go do this thing. It actually stole their credentials and took over their app so that they could distribute spam and other nasty things through their Chrome plugin. And as far as security awareness goes, I'm like, that's really hard because I've been in those situations. Now, I happen to be a security practitioner. Hopefully I should know better, and I investigate things like that before I click on them. But I can see the person like being in a tizzy and going, oh my God, like something's going to break, and rushing through it and not remembering those things from their security awareness training. How do you recommend that we improve situations like that?
Well, for us, it's fairly simple. And actually, we have those situations arise at Optiv and at some of the clients that I've worked with where there's a point person. So for us, it's me at Optiv, where if they have that sort of a OMG moment, right, that push, that they'll come to me, right? They at least know who to talk to. And I think a lot of times the problem is many companies don't have a very straightforward communications path. So they're like, who do I talk to? My manager's not around. I don't want to bother the CEO, but I want to cover my ass. There's always, if it's very clear that there's many places for them to reach out to. So, reach out to your service, your IT hotline, right? Oh, non-responsive. Reach out to your manager. Oh, non-responsive. Talk to one another and make a decision as to whether or not it's a good decision. I actually don't know if at that particular instance, did they talk with one another or were they all sitting in separate offices, each got the mail and were like, OMG. Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble.
It sounds like it was just an OMG moment, like, oh my God, something bad's going to happen if I don't go do this, and they did it. And now what's interesting is two-factor authentication could have helped them, but I kind of feel like in general conversations with people, like my neighbors and such, like if they see my two-factor authentication tokens, which I have right here because I love YubiKey, and I explain, even after I explain it to them like quickly in passing, they still don't understand the problem it's solving and why there's a huge benefit. Now, in this particular case, two-factor authentication probably could have done a good job of protecting them. But how do we get messages out to folks about some of these, for them, newer security technologies?
I think a lot of times it's overcomplicated and full of marketing hype. I don't know because you're a technician yourself, Paul, right? Like you've held very deeply technical positions before. I don't know if when you talk to them, if you're talking to them in actual layman's terms. And that's actually a lot of my role is spent speaking, let's not make it so complicated and so hard that people don't understand what we're saying to them. Mm-hmm. You need to just explain it into the simplest terms possible. And if it's like more than 3 bullet points long and it took more than the length of a tweet, it's probably overcomplicated. And sometimes you have to do multi-step and like show them. And if they do it, then they learn it, right? It's like leading the horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting how there is somewhat of a convenience factor at stake, especially when we do things like require a multi-factor authentication to log into things. Like, how do you sell that to your users as, there's some convenience you're going to have to give up, but there's a security benefit? How do you make them see that benefit?
I try to make it in terms of, I always try to find kind of like what I say, the Walmart analogy, right? So here's a good one. A lot of times when a company starts doing security awareness training, and usually it's an e-learning module because you have like 8,000 people in your company, right? You have to do it every year to be compliant, right? In the very minimum, every year to meet some weird compliance module. Checkbox, actually. So what will happen is invariably you'll get somebody who started 2 months before the refresher course. And they're like, only people who started within the last 30 days are excused from taking the course. Anyone who took the course before the 30-day mark has to retake it. And you'll get pushback because they're like, oh no, it was an hour and it took so much time and it's so fresh in my mind. And what I say to them, it's like electing to your benefits. Every year at large companies, you elect into your benefits, right? Your health, your dental, your insurance, whatever. And even if you were hired on October 1, if the new election date is November 1 for the first of the year, you still have to go in and reselect what you want for the start of the new year. So I explain to them that way, and then there's usually a lot less tension, but it's really tough. And you just have to figure out a way to be, please participate because this will have consequences, and usually negative ones if you don't, right? So that's, make it positive, but also make them understand that there are consequences, like someone may lose their job. Yeah, so, not necessarily them, but someone may lose their job.
The negative reinforcement is hard. I kind of liken it to my children. Positive reinforcement tends to work a lot better, but it's more
Right.
it's more difficult. A kind of funny story on that. So, going to Black Hat, I got like a huge bag of swag from all the vendors. I mean, 8 million fidget spinners, like the whole thing. And normally I would just come home and like hand it out to my kids, and they'd be throwing fidget spinners all over the place. But this year I did it differently. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I put it in a bag, and I said, when you're good, if you have a good day, you get to go pick a prize from the bag. If you don't have a good day, you don't get a prize. Are there
Right.
similar things that you do in your security awareness programs to do that positive reinforcement?
Absolutely. So the gamification module of it, where you're rewarding for good behavior.
Mm,
At Optiv, we have what we call a catch of the day program. And basically, we encourage people to report what they believe to be vulnerabilities to the company. Like, and any company can do this. Like, someone keeps consistently leaving the door open. Or,
right.
I saw this phishing email come through, and I think that it's targeted towards us. They send in a report. I always look at each one of them, and I respond to each one of them, thanking them. And then what we do is we do a random drawing.
Mm-hmm.
For everyone who submitted. Some people do, the one that was most impactful to the company. Some people, have a merit-based system. One of the companies I had worked for before, done work for, actually had merit-based systems. So it was, they have like the health benefits thing where everyone participates in
Right.
exercise and they get points. And then what they did was they extended to their security awareness program. So when they would participate in each one of the training modules for their e-learning every month, then they would get extra points, right? And they accrue that way. And everyone loves to be able to earn it. And it was interesting because when I went around this Black Hat show floor, of course, some of them are like, sit, watch our presentation, and then you can get the gadget
Right.
or be entered into the drawing. And it was interesting because everyone's like, well, how do I get that? But I changed the word to, how do I earn this? And they were like, wow, you're like the first person. Because I said, yeah, it makes it more easily digestible for me to want to sit through your presentation if I say, I'm going to earn this versus you're forcing me to sit here and consume this, right?
Right.
So that I can get that, right? So if you make it into an earn program, right, a merit-based program, you're absolutely right. Positive reinforcement works a lot better than negative reinforcement.
Yeah, I did find a lot of vendors doing that. They really want people to sit through the booth presentations.
Right.
And I'm sure some of them were good, and some people I know also give some of those booth presentations that are very outstanding presenters. So that can work. I took a different tack. I'm like, can you just do a briefing with me instead of me? Like, I want you to answer my questions. I'm sure your topic is interesting. I'm not taking away from that, but I did briefings to get some of the stuff to earn some of the stuff as well. So
right. Well, you just traded it, right? So
yeah.
You just compromise with them, which is actually another thing that I think money companies can learn from is that if they can compromise with their employee base, right? Like instead of saying take all the e-learning modules in 2 hours, spreading out over 12 months, right? So it's
Right.
like this compromise.
So you mentioned communication skills, and it's one of the things that Michael Santarcangelo and I talk about a lot on Startup Security Weekly, especially, but also on all of our other shows about how we communicate with people about security topics. And I think the general thinking is that we sometimes get way too technical. Are there tips that you have when we communicate, more technical folks communicate with others about security issues to not kind of pull them down into the weeds?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, shorter the better, right? Because time is always at a premium wherever you are. And I find that, yes, when people start getting way too technical in the weeds, it loses them, but it also takes a really long time for them to explain it. So the sort of a few bullet points I would always say is make sure there's an action item in there, and it should be one line. Explain to them what the problem is. It should be one line. And then and then also set a deadline, right? Like the expectation, do this by the end of the day, do this by X date. So that everyone's like, okay, here's the problem. Here's what we need you to do. And please do it by X. When you do that, you kind of reduce the amount of technical explanation that goes on.
Right.
And also if they read it out loud, and if they can read it to someone who's a non-technical participant, a sales guy, someone in HR, someone in finance, like someone who does not have that background, if they can read it out loud and understand what you're asking them, then it's not too technical.
Right. Do you find that some are dismissive of some of the security things that we point out because the media tends to focus on the topics that are very media friendly, like hacking a Segway? Of course, it was a voting machine, which is actually a legitimate concern. But some of the things that like I see in mainstream media about security are the very sensational things that I'm like, yeah, that's a like someone could hack my Segway while I'm riding it. It's probably more likely that I'm going to fall off by my own actions rather than someone hacking the Bluetooth on it. But I find that there's almost like this dismissive attitude because there's so much information coming about security, and a lot of it just like really like who cares, you know?
Right. It's cyber fatigue, right?
Yeah.
Just too much noise in the background. And that's unfortunate because that's how media has chosen to handle a lot of things, right? Whatever gets the most bumps at that moment is what they're interested in pushing. So absolutely, there's a lot of cyber fatigue. And I can only say that that's probably more evident even on the client side, right? Because for a long time, companies have just tried to push their latest technology or their latest service, and it's supposed to be the end-all, be-all to all their security problems. And we know that 9 out of 10 times that's not going to solve it because security is really people-oriented. It's not the boxes yet that just go off and cause problems, right? Yeah. And I think they forget that, right? The human element part of security and securing their company.
Alex Stamos gave what some believe is a controversial keynote for Black Hat. Alex, of course, the CSO at Facebook. What are your thoughts on? Did you see the talk, and what are your thoughts?
I actually missed it.
So the gist of what Alex was saying, and I didn't see the talk. I read some coverage of it.
Okay,
so it's it's riddled in a lot of opinions, but you know some of the underlying themes are that we need to basically grow up as hackers and become professionals and communicate in a more professional manner and things. And I don't disagree with there's obviously a lot of underlying details there, and I don't disagree on certain points certainly. But what are your thoughts on, and it kind of goes along with communicating and awareness, right? Like how can we do better as a community? Where are we on the scale of being able to communicate those issues that we're seeing? Like, I can hack into a car and turn it off. Where are we on the scale, and what can we improve on?
Well, that's a very interesting perspective that you have because it reminds me of in 2000, Marcus Raynham. Were you there at Black Hat USA when he gave the keynote?
I was not. I heard about it, though. Heard about it.
Right. We all heard about it. And so what he talked about was we kind of similarly that we had too many script kiddies who are taking all of the research that we were doing and freely disseminating at events like Black Hat, DEF CON, RSA, probably CCC, right? Because ShmooCon didn't exist, DerbyCon didn't exist yet. And they were taking and just doing nefarious things or not realizing the impact of just releasing code out in the wild and deploying exploits because it was giving them I feel great. I was able to hack the Gibson. but that's not, you're like, but now there's no electricity in LA for 10 days, right? That's not a real event that happened, but it's kind of the same thing. But I think what Alex is saying goes hand in hand with if we're not good parents and we don't raise our children well, they don't become good employees. And there's actually a TED Talk, I forget who it was that gave it, that now corporations are having to be the parent and teach people how to be good employees, have better communication skills because all they've done is be on a computer and not realize that maybe cyberbullying might cause someone to take their own life or cause a business to go under. And it's interesting that he says we as a community need to grow up because I don't think that, and I don't want to do it to service and I don't want to misquote because I did not see the keynote. I don't want to say us who were the first gen of hackers coming up to Black Hat DEF CON are the ones who are doing this. It's the younger ones more likely, right? The ones who don't know where we came from, who may not have had enough exposure to realize that their actions have consequences. And I think, unfortunately, the global internet shields them, right? And a friend of mine actually said the value of a skinned knee is greatly undervalued nowadays because kids don't go out and play with one another. They sit in front of an Xbox and they don't realize, again, how to actually help somebody and that their actions have consequences again. So, I mean, it's tough for me because I'm a big proponent that kids should not be exposed to electronics until they're about 8, 9, or 10, so that they can develop proper communication and relationship skills. And I'm not saying they have all the skills, but it's a big deal to not let your kid or a person be completely distracted all the time. I'm a big proponent that when we go in meetings, electronic devices off, unless you need it for the presentation, or there's someone who's doing all the recording, right, taking the meeting notes. I'm a big proponent of also pick up the phone and call somebody, talk. A lot of times people will be like, I try to get a hold of you on IM and SMS. And I was like, okay, well, I wasn't in front of my computer. Why didn't you pick up the phone and call me? And why aren't people doing that? That's a really good question, right? So I think the lack of communication, the lack of actual face-to-face, the actual lack of knowing who the people are that you're affecting has taken a toll on our society.
No, I think you're right. And I think that the elders, I'll put myself in that category, not you, Ping. The elders in our community need to do as much as we can, maybe more than what we're doing today, although that's a very global statement, right? Because there are some that are educating the younger folks in our community about just the things you're talking about, right? Consequences. The big mantra we have on the show is, yes, there's a difference between having permission to hack something and not, and usually that is prison. But those kind of messages need to permeate, and I agree, it needs to be done in a face-to-face, more personal level, because they can read an article about, that I wrote about, like, don't hack without permission. It's not going to sink in unless they're a part of the community and having that personal interaction, which, as you pointed out, is in danger of going away if we're not careful,
right?
Making people, and especially children, interact with each other.
It's tough because they said that, like, to really know all your neighbors, your village can't be larger than 150 people. And I mean, how many people have multiple hundreds or tens of thousands of followers, right, on their social media feed? But how many of them do they actually know in person? So it's really rough because we have remote workforce, right? And I'm a big proponent of remote workforce because you can offer people a quality of life that they normally might not have, because they can get a better paying job but work remotely, and be able to have the flexibility to take their kids in out of childcare, care for their elderly parent, take their sick dog to the vet if they really need to, et cetera, without being watched over. But I also know that there's pitfalls to that in terms of developing things together. Collaborative effort is often lost. Not knowing it's impossible to know everybody in our company, but having that face-to-face time and making other people real, that because you actually have spent time with them in a real setting, that's really important. That's really important for people to continue to develop and maintain their emotional intelligence. How's that?
Wow, that's deep. Yeah, and like I was saying before the show, because it's an issue that I really kind of latch onto, educating the youth, as scary as that is, that I have influence on the youth of today. But we're getting involved with the Cyber Patriot, which I think is a great program. For young blossoming hackers, we're getting together and trying to put on a conference for them to let them meet the folks like myself and others locally in the area who work in security. And it's a chance to, educate them about our community and about, what it means to be a good hacker versus a bad hacker and those kinds of lessons. So
cool.
So what else? So you were out at Black Hat? Yep. I saw you there.
Networking.
Yes.
Yes, we ran into each other in the hallway, and I completely forgot that we ran into each other in the hallway.
Yes, we did. It's interesting, though, those large conferences, you see everyone so quickly because there's so many people there. It makes me thankful there's a lot of smaller shows where you get to spend a little more quality time with more people, I think.
Yeah, and it's tough because I remember when the show was 200 people, 300 people, 600 people, and there was a time when we knew every single speaker, every single trainer, and that everyone could sit down and have dinner together, including all the helpers at the show with the trainers and speakers, and that was always a treat. And then
the vendor area was like a bunch of like folding tables and stuff.
It was folding tables in the hallway. Microsoft was one of our big sponsors and never had a table, but we always put their logo in the book. And I'm like, why do they? And they were like, well, because the sponsor package came with passes, but also just to get passive exposure. And I think maybe they used it as a recruiting event. So they went in and networked with people. It was very small back in the day. When I say back in the day, that was like 2000 through 2003 or 4. 2005, it kind of got out of control. That was the year Black Hat was sold.
Yeah.
Just kind of now we have to have its own show floor, right? Vendor area.
Multiple levels of
multiple levels now. Three levels of it. And it's a huge undertaking for the event organizer. And I sometimes wonder about the delegate experience. And I'm not going to say it's good or bad, but definitely for people like you and I who are there from the early years, we're like, wow, we used to know everybody and you could see everybody. And so now we seek out the smaller events to have the quality time, because the big shows are necessary, right? We have to go there, network as much as we can, at least say hello in passing, go visit and see the new technologies, right? The presentations if you can make it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of focus on even on a personal level, what's new. I know those people, but we're at a big event. I want to meet new people, right? So you kind of tend to, and then the smaller ones is where you catch up, I think, with the people that you know. Which smaller events do you like to attend, Bing?
DerbyCon. I haven't gone in the last 2 years, but it used to be DerbyCon would be probably my favorite. I've been to ShmooCon, went to CCDC 1 year. I cannot remember the show that FX used to do, the Phenolit show.
Yes.
He hasn't had that in a few years. That was a great event. Of course, it was in Berlin. I haven't had a chance to go to Tokyo yet and see the one that Kana Shinoda puts together. I forget the name of it. I'm sorry. Normally I'd be looking it up right now. It starts with Blue. I don't want to call it Blue Security, but Code Blue. Code Blue.
Yeah, okay.
It's usually in October.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to go to that event just because Kana's near and dear to my heart, and she was our organizer in Japan. So I'm not saying she's maintained a competitive event. It's a very small community-based event, but I think that there was always such an excitement when you come to Black Hat and DEF CON in the earlier years. Like, it was palpable. You cut it with a knife, how excited everyone was to see one another. And now I'm not going to say the excitement's to go see new technology. But the experience for someone like you and I is very different than someone who's newer in the industry to go to an event like Black Hat and DEF CON.
Yeah, a lot of us
remember what it was like.
Those of us that have been to the hacker summer camp for a long time, we tend to just like we're old crotchety, complaining about the heat, we're in Vegas
the
again.
Prices.
Yeah, everything's
expensive. Get a $5.95 steak.
It's 108 degrees out, blah, blah, blah. And the newer folks are like, hey, I'm in Vegas for the first time. This is great. And it's interesting. Well, I tend to gravitate towards interacting with some of the newer folks because they do have so much energy and they're not as curmudgeon-y as some of us that have been around for a while.
Right. But, there's a thing about change, right? And that's the one thing that's really difficult with any human nature is, for the most part, change. And no one likes that change. So we hold on to the old way of doing things, right? And I think that that's also part of the problem, right? When we have people coming new into the information security realm, which is they kind of hold on to the romanticized version of, and then he hacked the Gibson and didn't get in trouble, so I should hack the Gibson and I won't get in trouble.
Right.
But now it's not quite as simple as that. So, it's always a little bit of a culture clash, right? Do right, but when you're doing right, sometimes you're doing wrong. But it feels so good, so then you just gotta do it. And it's kind of like, well, we have to do adult time. It's adulting time, right? Yes, sometimes the things that we want to do are not the right things.
Right.
I don't know. The rule should just be protect the innocent. So long as what you're doing isn't harming an innocent person, it's probably okay. And maybe that's a question people should be asking themselves: is what I'm doing protecting the innocent? If you're exposing the innocent people, not a good thing.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of there is some mentorship kind of programs to kind of speak to that. InfoSec Mentors is a great program. I feel like we need more of that because there's so many new people in the field, and even just how you experienced the conference today, I found to kind of segue off was different. There was so much going on. Like, I felt like no matter how much I planned, my plan was just wrong, and I didn't get to see everything that I wanted to see.
Right. So maybe don't go with a plan.
Yeah. Well,
but it's tough, right? Because I personally, what I did, I was like, okay, my days will be free with the exception of, I had to do a speaking thing. I had to meet with 2 or 3 people. I had a couple of interviews, and those were infallible because you have to work with somebody else. But everything else was just fluid. And actually, I was fortunate enough to spend a good amount of time going through the show floor with Nathan Maragoni, and he is an ex-Optiv person, and he's doing his own thing. And I've known him forever. He's been a speaker at Black Hat. You probably know Nate. And he's on the Black Hat Review Board. So we actually went through the show floor together. And it was a very interesting experience for me because I'm not a deeply technical person. And he, like you, he was like, I want to talk to these people because it's new. I don't know anything about them. And he was like, the new hotness right now is AI. He was like, but I don't know if it's bad math or if it's real math. And so
Depends.
like you, it depends. And so like you, he did the thing where, okay, I'm going to earn this by asking you about your technology and learning more about your company and what it is you do and what your widget does. So that was a really interesting experience for me because normally, you're just going through there and you're like, okay, what's new? Hey, hi, bye, right?
Right.
So it was interesting to experience it side by side with someone who is deeply technical. And deeply vested in a different way in the event than I was.
Right. And, I think that many people, including myself, we used to kind of poke fun at vendors and go ask questions and like laugh if they didn't have the right answer. I think there was some of that. And I think largely, at least in my own circle, we've gotten away from that. And we're really there to help vendors as well. And I think a lot of that stems from how you ask the question, right? And I don't know about Nate's experience, but I tend to tune my questions now so that I try to set up the vendors for success. So I don't ask them what they do. I ask them what problem they solve. And then I had to preface, because people will just come back with what they do. I'm like, no. What problem do you solve? I'm like, and in your answer, you can't talk about AI or machine learning because that's your solution. That's what you do, or maybe what you do. You need to talk about the problem. And like a few people are like really like stumped by that. Like it's amazing to see their reactions. Like they haven't thought about that. And I try to, in doing the shows, allow vendors to understand that they should lead with the problem that they solve, right? That's the first thing that I care about when I go to the booth, and potential customers should as well. So,
yeah, and it's interesting because I talk to a lot of people because Black Hat has a huge contingent of volunteers who are all in college age or newly graduated. And so a lot of these people are starting to explore professional work life after college.
Right.
And they're like, okay, so, and I would kind of talk to them. I'm like, so are you prepared for your interview? Most of them have interviews coming up, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, so what questions do you have for the person the person you're going to interview with? They're like, it's always pay, benefits, vacation, or sick days. And I said, okay, that's fine and good. But every company is going to have some variation of that. But if you want to be a long-term employee at this company, why aren't you asking them, what can they do to help you advance your career? Do they have mentors? Do they have like a set way of promoting? These intangible things that, yes, I realize they're new to the professional workforce and they may not have the experience to ask about. I'm like, that's actually more important because you don't want to go there, be there frustrated for a year and be like, why? I want to be on the director level. What's it going to take? And realize this company has just been handing out director level titles regardless because it was a startup, right? And they don't have any infrastructure to support them. Like, what about continuing education, right? If you want to pursue a master's at some point or CISSP, or some other accreditation, will they support that? Will they send you? Those are, to me, things that will improve yourself, prepare you probably for your next job or for moving up within that company. And those are, kind of things like didn't want to say like who's mentoring you on this, but it's not as straightforward, right? Like, so the kind of questions you're asking the vendors, like, oh, yes, I realize what you do is machine learning, but like a very specific, like how it solves the problem. I don't know. 9 out of 10 times, were you given a response that you were satisfied with?
Not usually.
Right. So I try because they sent the wrong people, or do you think it's because
sometimes
their product doesn't?
It's a great point, and I think whether you're looking for a potential job or like you got to ask for the right people at the booth. So I try not to like stare at name tags, and I try not to like be completely prejudiced and be like the first person that comes up like, oh, you're not the person I need to talk to. I'm like, you very well could be a product marketing manager or product manager. Like that's the kind of person you need to talk to. I'm like, if you're that person, great. If not, like I really would like to talk to someone that has some technical background and some marketing and or product management background. So I I have tailored it to get better results. When I have a large floor like Black Hat to work with, I had to cut right to the chase. I'd be like, no, like go find your most technical or most senior person here, and let's just. And I hate doing that. I like to give everyone the opportunity, but there was just too many vendors to meet with.
So what you're saying is everyone needs to have a color code system.
Yes.
So that if they're just like the marketing person handing out the bracelets to the party, support staff, right? Event support staff. They need to have a color code that says that's what they are. And then if they're the technologist, they need to be like a different color so you can identify them.
Even better, have a coaching session with everyone who's going to be at your booth. And it's really easy. I think if there's a core set of questions, like what problem do you solve? Why do you solve it better? And just kind of segue off of those two questions. The third question I like to ask is like, what's the client or customer's return on investment, or like, how do your customers measure success once they've implemented? If you can answer those three questions, like you're golden. That's awesome. I wish every vendor would just, correctly answer those three questions. And I had a lot of great conversations at Black Hat actually.
Good.
With a lot of vendors, so I'm excited. Ping, if people, are you still on the Social Engineer podcast with Chris?
I am. I missed the last few scheduling conflicts.
Yes.
But I am.
Awesome. So they can check out social-engineer.org, something like that.
Org.
And
how can you not know?
It was .org.com. I knew it, something like that. I got the dash right.
Is his professional side. So.
Yes, so that is the Social Engineer podcast. I've been on. It's a great time if you want to hear more Ping, and I guess if you want to hear Chris too, but more for Ping.
Chris does most of the talking now.
That's too bad.
You can't get a word in edgewise with Chris.
Oh, really? Interesting. I know. I've been on the show. I was like, I was the guest. I didn't really have to say much. So Ping, thank you very much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you.